Subecz Ákos.
Hi there, this is our last presentation before lunch. Ákos Subecz is going to deliver the presentation. Don't be misled by his young age, because he's really experienced. He went to the European Championship in Beijing. He was
Néhány hete jöttél haza, és a magyar csapat oszlopos tagjaként begyűjtöttek egy hatodik,
Anyway,
második
they had a second, fourth, and sixth
hogy milyen biztonsági hiány.
place, and he is going to talk about the security shortfalls in Hungary. So, Ákos, the floor is yours. Warm welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for the introduction. What I'd like to talk about today is that in Hungary, what sort of security shortfalls you can meet, which for us lockpickers is rather apparent, but there are certain people here who would not really use these shortfalls and shortcomings as they should. Why we need to talk about this? Well, on the one hand, we need to talk about this because the lockpicking and burglary statistics are quite high in Hungary. Going around in the buildings and in the streets, you can see that people are not using quality locks and quality solutions. This is partly due to the fact that they do not get the right information about what is quality and what is not quality. Quite often, not even the stores, lock stores, know what they can and should suggest an offer and what they shouldn't. And the third thing is that, which is quite interesting, by the way, is that, let me just say that I'm also into locks, so I'm also installing locks, and what I see is people don't like to spend on security, and we know that in real life there are things that are bad, but every good thing, the good things are not cheap, they are not going to be cheap. And day by day, I see people coming in, asking for the cheapest, the simplest, saying that, okay, they're not going to break into this house anyway. And due to this mentality as well, the burglary statistics in Hungary is just showing an increasing trend. And let's see what the shortfalls are that really affect these statistics. Now, one is that we use cheap locks, and these cheap locks, from a lockpicking point of view, do not have the protection, the right protective capability that would protect you against opening up. Most of the breaking up is using force, it's intrusive violence. So they break the window, they break the door, and only very small percentage is the unintrusive method, and probably they are using that because they need no time to open up that lock, and of course the burglar doesn't want to be there. So if there is a higher security lock, even a lockpicker cannot tell you how fast and how quick he open the lock. But whenever they see a simple lock, they would just say 1 minute and it's going to be open. Now let's talk about lockpicking for those who were not here last year. Here we can see the scheme of a cylinder lock. This is about a certain cylinder which is going to turn and open the lock. And what really matters is that we can also see the pins, the closing pins. And when the right key with the right cut is put into the lock in such a way that the pin pairs are standing in such a way that the line between them, or the gap between them, is just between the lamel and the cylinder, then you can just open your door. Now, if it's not the right key, then it may happen, as you can see, that in the second position, one or even more pins will not be pushed down, and therefore there will still be a pin preventing the turning of the cylinder that is opening the lock. That could be a too high cut, a key with a too high cut, or it could be a key with a too low cut, which would press the pin out, but would also press the pin of the cylinder into the house, and therefore it again would prevent the cylinder from turning. Now the upper chart shows you a lock picking tools. I just try to select the ones that are used for rating technique. You can see that they are shaped in such a way that if you put them into the lock and move them back and forth, you can test a lot of different combinations. Basically, we are mimicking the shape of the appropriately cut key. This is the technique you can see there. You see, you just move it back and forth and a bit up and down. So this is how you move it, and then you will have a fair chance that you will hit the code, which is going to open the lock, to put it this way. And then I just collected a couple of photos from police.hu, internet portal of the Hungarian National Police. Now, let's look at the tools. These are all rate equipment or tools, and also an electric opener. Now, these are all tools mimicking or giving you the ability to use the same technique, and this is good because the cheap locks with low security profile and being cheap with low security profile, these could be easily opened. And as I said, the burglar doesn't want to spend 15 minutes in front of a door trying to get in. But if they see a cheap lock with high tolerance, then they're going to try. They're going to give it a try. And even if someone has an insurance policy, then the insurer is not going to pay the insurance company, because quite often they will not be able to spot that the house was broken in. Although there is a branch of science, actually a discipline dealing with the traces left by such tools, but the Hungarian experts normally cannot make a difference. Now here we can see a number of cheap locks, the Chinese security locks and security doors, and the Chinese lock. Now there is only one common in these, is that the lock-picking tool in the right-hand corner opens all of them. Now we have the Chinese padlocks. The Chinese padlocks have a lot of vulnerabilities. What you can see in the photo is that you use a piece of wire, and then you just replace the key by that wire, and you just start attacking the pin within the padlock, which will allow you to turn around the cylinder. But in these padlocks, they did not put an extra piece of metal into the padlock, so that would prevent the putting in of those mock keys. Now, the shimming technique is also based on the same principle, that you just again press in a piece of metal sheet into the keyhole, and then in seconds you just open the padlock. And this is my favorite. In hobby and do-it-yourself and the bricolage stores and a lot of places, they're offering you discount security doors, 50,000 forints, that is 200 euros with installation. And then my neighbor came to me saying, I just purchased a very good security door. It was only 50,000 forints. If we deduct the cost of installing, because of course that also has a price. You just deduct the VAT, the customs, the transport costs, and also the margin of the trader. Then you will get to practically nil, and this is what will give you the quality of the door. On the internet, you have a video on YouTube. If you, I think it's Chinese beautiful security door on YouTube, and then it's a 5 years old girl opening such a security door with a hairpin. Now, this is the cylinder padlock cylinder lock that is in that door. They say it's magnetic, but it's not. It is a normal 7-pin lock, and we can see that this is really bricolage. Okay, it's like, and I wanted to go and look inside that lock to see what the technique, the manufacturing technique was. I think that they just used a Firestone or a rotating saw. Actually, I saw no straight lines within the structure itself, and I suggest that if you have such a door, you just replace that door immediately, okay? Because this is not that bad in terms of because it's sometimes difficult to open even with the proper key, because it is not a precise structure. But first, sooner or later, you are just going to lock yourself out of your own apartment because it would just break down. Now, there is another notion which in Hungarian public speech is used, which is called the lock comb. And what is this? When we go anywhere, they always keep asking us, do you have a lock comb? Let's look at what a lock comb is. It's really like a comb. But according to its proper function, it is not the pin positions that you will set and manipulate this way, but through the key channel you will just hold all of the pins, both the cylinder pins and the house pin, and then all of them you press them into the house. And then no pin will be left there, and you can turn the cylinder. This is a 1 second instantaneous opening technique, but this technique has been barred out by the manufacturers because they realize that they need to put in pin pairs, which pin pairs are longer even if the spring is suppressed, and then you cannot use this technique. There's also a manufacturing standard, which I don't know by heart, but I know that the Chinese don't know the notion of manufacturing standards. Therefore, this is still manufactured in such a way that the technique works properly everywhere. And then there is another lock, which is the LZ 200. No, the LZ double key, which used to be considered to be one of the best. I would just like to present to you that it's a piece of crap. I just gave one of these locks to my Croatian friend, to this Croatian friend of mine, and I said, try it, because I'm a lockpicker, but you should try it. He was a beginner practitioner, let me put it this way. And then next day I got an email from him titled Easy Picking. And it was about, it was showing you the following video.
Tehát láthatóan egy nyers kulcsa, nem belevaló nyers kulcsa, amin
You can see that there is a
kialakítva.
you can see that there is a key which is not yet cut, an uncut key, a virgin key, and it opens the lock. And at the email, he said, but thank you. That was the end of the mail. Now let's also talk about the possible or potential protection. What the manufacturers try to apply in order to protect from these techniques. Now, this is, if you look at the lock, and this is what you see, this is the key profile. It's an easy key profile. You can use a tool easily to get through, and that gives you the opportunity. But in this picture, you can see the monster. This is what we call the monster. You can see that you cannot really manipulate it. You cannot go. You cannot push in an object or anything into it, which is a good protection in itself. But there is only one problem here, and the problem is that due to the lot of small angles, it is not usable. And the reason it's not usable is because if you're not inserting the key properly, you just apply some tension, then it is going to bend, and tomorrow it's not going to open, and tomorrow you will not be able to use it. So I just suggest something simpler, more simple than this. Now the other one, the other protection against picking, is the use of security pins. Now these security pins is that the person who tries to pick it should feel that the pins are already on the properly positioned, but not. That's not the case. You can see the different lamels here. They have different feelings, but it gives you the impression as if they were already positioned properly, but they are not positioned properly, and that would prevent fine opening. Now, the other solution is the so-called sidebar. You see, it's not only the pin that is there, but also there is a sidebar, as its name says, and that sidebar also needs to be positioned in order to make the cylinder turnable. Next one. This is the multi-lock type of, this is used by Multi-Lock Interactive. This is the pin in the pin, or bar in the bar, where it is not one pair of pins, but there is another pair of pins within the first pair of pins, and this could significantly make the fine picking difficult. And stepping back to Chinese, they actually made a tool that worked quite well with this multi-lock, and then the manufacturer said, well, okay, let's just change the characteristic. But the Chinese realized that that key worked very well, and therefore they patented it, and I think this was the first ever patent. Now the other problem is that these cheap padlocks do not protect against destructive techniques. So if you want to drill it, then you can just drill it. The new ones are protected with hard metal parts so that you could not drill them easily, but the cheap ones do not have that type of protection, or if they have that type of protection, it is just it is just for the sake of marketing and nothing else. They do not resist tension applied, they do not resist drilling. I also saw instances when they just pressed in a knife or just a straight piece of metal, and they were able to turn it. A good example to the destructive opening is the so-called disc detainer padlock, Chinese disc detainer padlock, which they copied from someone else's padlock, and there are padlocks, rotating padlocks, ensuring the closing and the opening. Now, August, which is a German quality producer, can be opened more easily with the tool, the picking tool that is there, than this one with its own picking tool. The August is much more refined. It's a much more refined. There's a lot of it's refined technique. However, this is more safe. Is safer or more secure rather. But there's something they forgot about, and that is the fact that it appears to be quite massive, but they forgot to think of something. That is to put the discs into a plastic housing, and then this element can be very easily displaced with a screwdriver, and once you shake out the discs, you can simply open the lock.
Another great problem that I am confronted with every day is the wrong installation of the locks. And of course, wrong installation actually provides even more opportunities for those attempting to break in than the actual production quality problems. I'm sure you've heard about cylinder snapping, that the lock insert was actually snapped. The above pictures actually have one thing in common. It takes a minute to actually snap the inserts, the locks. On the first one you see there's absolutely no protection around the lock. The second one shows that there is this sort of a covering label on but it is actually fitted with screws from the outside, therefore all you need to do is unscrew it. The third one shows a more professional shield, but there you can see that the lock actually budges out, comes out a bit, protrudes. How can you actually break the cylinder? If you actually do a blown out picture of the lock, what you see is that the two very, very narrow, thin metal elements that join the two parts of the lock, and this is quite a weak spot. So basically, if it actually protrudes enough that you actually hold it with a special vise or with something else, and you move it left, right, up, down, and try and snap the metal, then it is very easy to snap. And the moment you've removed that, you basically just take a thin wire and then pull the lock mechanism aside. And then, of course, it happens if you're burgled. This is what you get to see. A few kinds of so-called lock snappers pictures. There are some special ones. The top two are specially made, designed for lock snapping. The ones on the right, the two color ones, are actually the work of a locksmith. And what is interesting with these is that it is so thin that even if it does not protrude and it is not protected and it does not even protrude from the surface of the door, he can still break it, he can still hold it. And what is perhaps what is most popular is this so-called Swedish vise, which uses a water pump. A very nice example for lock snapping, a metal door that I found, where you can see a cylinder lock. I think it protruded a good 1.5 centimeters, and I really smiled to myself. And then I read what was on the sticker next to the door, next to the lock. It actually says, warning, the key of the attendants of the filling station cannot open the safe, only the money transportation company can. What kind of solutions do we have to actually prevent this? One technology is to actually have some sort of flexible yet very strong material to link the two parts of the lock. So you can break it, but you cannot pull it out because it will still hold, and it will just move right and left or back and forth, it is a very good protection, I think. Practically speaking, I think what works to its benefit is that it is universal, and then if you take into account any lock that you can that is modular, and let's say we move, the new door is, let's say, 1 centimeter thicker. We can use the old lock. We take it to a locksmith. He extends it 1 centimeter, and we can still use it. There are some cylinders where you have a perforation, and if someone attempts to break it, it will not break where the screw is. The front will break off, and from then on you cannot grasp it. Or another possibility, they invented it with an English product. They have included such a protection that basically, instead of a screw fixing it, it is a hard metal that is actually securing it. You can still break it out, half of it, but the whole clutch structure is actually fixed to the inside part. So if you break out the external part, you cannot have access because the clutch mechanism will still be there, will still obstruct. And in addition to this, there's an internal cam fixed to the inner side, and that basically renders the whole lock useless. You will not have access to the lock mechanism. And of course there will be cylinders that combine this, so the front part is perforated, hardened metal used, and the side also has a hardened protruding part so that you cannot actually go in on the sides. What other things can we do to protect against lock snapping? Of course, a good cover, a good shield. Because if we buy a good lock in Hungary, that is quite an expensive endeavor. We put it into a door that has a normal, simple aluminium handle and the cover. They might not be able to come in, but we might be forced to buy a new lock. So, this is why we suggest the installation of a so-called protective, very simple protective shield, which basically does not allow.
Now, this is actually fixed from the inside, therefore you cannot see it from the outside. This is probably the most basic protection of the lock cylinder. Now, if you put this, if you install this, then this is going to be quite close to the edge of the rim of the door, and therefore it is going to make it more difficult for the intruder to use different tools to break the door, to use a crowbar or a pinch bar. Now, those who are not really skilled to look into the lock cylinder and see what is inside, that could be actually a bit less certain whether this is a significant or a simpler lock. So this gives an incognito, ensures an incognito for the lock, which is good because no specific techniques could be searched, because normally people are looking for special techniques to open the, and it's also safe against snapping. What you can see here is the so-called drum Gemini protective shield, or the Drumgerini protective shield, which is already a complex closed system. And you need a separate key to open the shield in order to have access to the cylinder. This is the our protect that is combined with, which is not known to be openable through picking, lock picking. Now, the lock plug pulling is also a well-known technique, and you can see some of these techniques that you can see there. And the point of the technique is that you have you just screw in a screw or a bolt, and then you just start pulling it out. And if we think about what the diameter of the pins is, because this is 2 to 3 millimeters, made of copper or any other soft metal. So when it's open with a key, then it's always just a protective ring that keeps it there. So if you pull it quite hard, then we just cut off those pins. Those pins are cut off by the cylinder being pulled out. And this is the result that you can see here. This has been taken out from a dome lock plug. And then you can see actually the plug opened. So it is wise or advisable to have such a protective shield that would prevent from lock plug pulling as well. And of course, if you look at the Chinese quality, you don't always need the puller to pull the plug. And let's also talk about what could give an opportunity to try to break into your apartment. You could see the lock in this door. This is 700 lock, and this has an approximately 2.5 centimeter of lock lamel. 22 millimeters is out of the rim, so I'm not going to risk it, but I think you just need to apply a bigger push or a hit, or if you have a saw with you, then you can do it immediately. In 5 minutes, you can have marvelous result.
The right side, you have a basically metal grill that was protecting the roof of a building, that you shouldn't be allowed to go out to the roof, which is okay. It would have been a problem if it protects actually a home, because you can see there's absolutely no protection, any sort of cover, any shield. It's a simple LZ lock. The real problem is that when they installed it, they forgot to actually cover it. So practically speaking, if you look from the side, all you need is a wire, a metal wire, and just open the tongue of the lock that would otherwise be operated with the lock mechanism.
Másik nagy kedvencem a hevederzárak. Biztos, hogy találkoztatok már hevederzárral.
I'm sure you've seen the other kind of security lock, the real quality Miskolc made, cheaper, the cheapest for the customer.
Az még nem is lenne baj, hogy ezeket a hevederzárakat úgy erősítek, hogy már van hozzá ugye egy zárbetétel.
Of course, most of the cases when they've installed these, they forget to tell the customers that these are really bad quality. So if you have the old type of cylinder in your lock, change it. But you can see the problem that the lock is installed right above the mail opening slot. You have 4 screws holding this in place, you basically all you have to do is take it off, and if you have a thinner hand, you can actually just put your hand in through the slot. This is what happened once the painter actually painted everything on the door, every single thing, and basically we had to liberate the door from the hardened paint. And of course we used it on this lock. Basically took off the mail covering. I unscrewed the lock and pushed the whole thing inside. Perhaps a bit better and more suggested solution. In apartment blocks they don't have these mail openings anymore, it's only spam that's coming through it anyway. Mailboxes are located at the entrance, so if you want to install this kind of a lock, the first thing you have to do is actually, first of all, do away with the mail slot opening. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'd like to ask you, you can try lockpicking and other interesting things during our workshop.